Would a tax on private schools be unfair on parents? Now, the Labour leader has promised to do just that on day one of a Labour government. Sir Keir Starmer doubled down on Labour's commitment to apply VAT straight away if his party wins the general election. But some head teachers have warned that parents are already cancelling school places in September amid fears that Labour will get into power. So do you agree with a tax rate on private schools, or does it feel like we're punishing parents for trying to get their kids a good education? 0207 862 2222 is the number for your thoughts on this. Mike, where do you stand when it comes to VAT on private schools?
I think it'll be an absolute tragedy if we smash up the independent school sector in this country, because it is revered around the world and it produces great results, OK? I think it's the politics of envy. I can't understand why they want to do it. I went to the King's School Chester, right? And I only went there because I got a scholarship paid for by the bursaries in the school, OK? My dad sold brushes for Addis. He couldn't afford to send me to a private school, but I got a fantastic education. I'm now an Old King's Scholar. I contribute to the bursaries, which today provide places for children whose parents would not be able to pay for them for that standard of education. I think it's pernicious, and I think it's the politics of envy, because what I'd prefer is them to concentrate on improving the state education system, not deliberately trying to smash up another system, which is private education, which is very efficient and gives great opportunities to children. My school as well, the King's School Chester, lets all the facilities that it has there, a swimming pool, playing fields, lets them be used by other schools in the area.
Charitable status too?
It has charitable status, absolutely, because this is not just a VAT raid. They're going to remove the business rate relief, aren't they? Because they're charitable status. So it's a really...
No, I think charitable status is staying. I'd remove it, but I don't think Labour's going to take it away.
The business rate relief is going, isn't it? Yeah, which is 100 million.
But I think you'll find...
I can't understand it. I bet you half of the front bench of Labour have sent their kids to private schools.
Yeah.
OK. Keir Starmer went to Reigate Grammar.
Can I take that bet, because you're wrong? You'll lose.
Well, I bet
That's all right. Just bet all your money, your pension, all your properties. Bet the lot.
No.
Bet the lot.
All right.
I'll pay your bursary to the school out of all your winnings.
A lot of people in the Labour Party send their kids to private schools. I bet it has happened in the past.
Well, they'll have to pay.
We know that Diane Abbott sent her children to private schools, so that's hypocrisy,
they'll have to pay.
Yeah.
But the whole point of the policy is to improve education.
Well, it
the
won't.
94%, including middle class, including aspirational people who use the real public schools, the state schools, by employing 6,500 extra teachers. If you wish to send your children privately and pay and get the advantages of that, that's fine. It's your right. It's your right.
And you're helping out the country.
But I cannot see why.
Hold on, Mike. Let Kevin finish.
Didn't they teach you manners in your private school? They certainly did in my state school. I know. It was below the belt, but I thought it'd make Storm laugh.
All right.
Anyway, but look, private schools, right? A charity is something you do for other people. You're doing this for yourself. And I can't see why you should get the VAT exemption. If you want to pay, fine, pay. That's OK. But I don't see why you should get the VAT exemption for a very small portion of the country, which comes by and large from higher income bracket people, when that VAT will then be used to improve education for the overwhelming majority.
Yeah. What about the argument, though, that actually what you're going to do is you're going to take those just on the cusp of being able to afford private school out and putting that extra weight back onto the state sector?
Yeah.
I seen somewhere today that it was a quarter of pupils from the private sector would flood into the state sector.
That was from a private... Sorry, I'm going to explain.
I know,
a private school lobby group.
The
Institute for Fiscal Studies, a very respected think tank, often quoted on your programme. They looked at this, and their best estimate is it could impact 3 to 7% of people's which would cost, if you put them in the state sector, would cost 100 million to 300 million. So that the VAT would raise 1.6 million, which is why it might leave 1.3 or 1.5 billion left. To spend on those extra 6,500 teachers and some other things. So yes, you're quite right. But the VAT would pay for those other pupils quite easily if they go into the state sector.
Let me put this to you. You know, Storm mentioned on the cusp. People are on the cusp, right? Do you think Eton will ever close down? No. Will Winchester ever close down? No. It doesn't matter what the cost of education your child there is, no. But we've just heard, or I've heard today, a private school in Alton in Hampshire is now closing down because so many parents have removed their children from the school. They won't be able to pay the extra 20%. So it's those kids from those middle-class homes who are losing out. The people at Winchester and Eton and Marlborough won't.
Private schools close anyway because they're not very good. I know of 4 that transferred into the state system as academies because they couldn't get fee-paying
OK, but private schools will have to take a hit on this.
Yeah.
Helen from Dorset, how do you feel about this? Do you think it's fair? It would help the state system potentially by employing new teachers?
No. I think it's ridiculous.
I mean, 1.7 billion, is that ridiculous?
1.7 billion of what?
Money.
I'd like
pounds.
to ask Keir Starmer how he intends to educate these children, with those poor parents who can't afford to send their children anymore. They'll all be taken out of the private system and taken into the state system.
Yes.
Which would be detrimental to the children.
Well, I mean, you say that, Helen, but I think the idea is to try and make the state school, lift the state school up, rather than tear the private school down. The theory is...
You'll be lucky.
Carry on.
You'll be lucky.
At the moment, Helen, the average spend in the state sector per pupil is about £8,000 a year. The private sector day schools, it's 16,000, more than double. So if you want to improve education overall, you've got to get up the spending on the state schools that have 93 to 94% of the pupils. That's what it's all about. What's wrong with that? Isn't that a good goal for the country?
But shouldn't that come out of our taxes? We're already paying taxes.
VAT is a tax.
OK, VAT.
It won't raise much, though, will it?
Helen...
Well, we've just gone through the figures, about 1.6 billion. Yeah.
1.6 billion.
Thank you very much for your call. Brian from West Lothian, what's your view when it comes to private schools paying VAT? Do you think that's fair? It's fair? You would pay it for anything else. Morning.
Another Scottish person.
Oh, well, funny, there is a few of us about.
Not rare.
Sorry about that. I always fall into Billy Connolly. I do apologise.
That's all right, that's fine. What's your thoughts on private schools?
What is I've got 2 granddaughters, one in her 20s now. She's left school, but she was at private education in Edinburgh. My youngest granddaughter, who's 11, is also in private education as well now. Now, my daughter and my son-in-law work very hard. You know, they've got their own business and stuff, and to send the kids to a good education. Now, my argument here, I was saying to your colleague on the phone, is if we don't send our kids to the local council schools, as we call them, the government has to pay for that education. So we're actually saving the government money by putting them into private schools.
Absolutely. You know, making a contribution to the well-being of our children in this country by funding their education personally. I think it's a great idea. OK,
Brian, you might have a point, but you could still do that, pay 20% more and help fund teachers in the state system as well to sort of level out the playing field even a little.
Apart from my daughter, my son-in-law working hard, a lot of the people they know, the parents in these schools, are working class who have made good and maybe got their own business. But they're paying money, a lot of money anyway for this. Now, if you put the tax on the schools, it means that the prices for the education for the kids will go up as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it certainly means that a lot of children will be leaving private education and going back into the state system. It's just, which is...
The reason they go to private school in the first place is because the state education, unfortunately, isn't good enough.
So it's a chicken and egg situation. How do we lift the standard of the state education so that it becomes a viable option for some parents? Brian, thank you very much for your call. Jamie from Chester, what's your view? VAT, I mean, you pay it everywhere else. Why not pay it in private school?
Good morning, yes. I'm actually a teacher at a private school near Chester. It's not King's, before he gets excited. But our feeling is that the parents who are paying the private fees are also already paying for state schools anyway in their other taxes that they pay.
Yes, OK.
So there's that side of it. Also, there was an argument a minute ago that, yes, but the money raised will be able to pay for extra teachers and extra schools that will be needed if these schools shut. But if the school's shut, there's nothing to charge VAT on anyway.
No, the Institute
So
for
where's that money going to come
Yeah,
from?
Jamie, the Institute of Fiscal Studies tackled this as well, very respected think tank, as you know. And if any parent is no longer paying their money on school fees, they'll be spending it on something else, and there's something else they almost certainly spend it on will have VAT attached, so the money will stay the same.
Interesting. Does that relieve any of your fears?
No, I think it just sounds like a factual answer.
I mean, they're not going to keep the money in the bank, are they? So they are going to spend it somewhere.
No, they're not. But there's also the time gap as well, because if a school closes, you've suddenly got 700 kids going into the local community school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to build a school and train teachers with the money that suddenly comes in that time.
Jamie, I appreciate you work in a private school. You've got an interest in sustaining that for your salary and your livelihood. No criticism there whatsoever.
It's not a salary issue, I promise you. We're paid less than a state school.
Well, if your school wasn't, oh God, you want to join a trade union if you haven't already, then you want to do that. But of course, this is all about improving education for everybody.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Jamie, on that note,
that.
I'll move to another call. Thank you, though, for your insight on that. Josephine from Kent, what's your thoughts on VAT for private schools?
I think it's so unfair. My husband's had to take on a second job in the likelihood that we're potentially going to have to pay extra on our school invoices. We tried to get him into a state school, but they offered him the underperforming school. You know, in classes that are over 30, he would have got swallowed up. He wouldn't have had a good education. We do without designer clothes and holidays because we're prioritising his education because we have to, because the state is not adequate enough to give the correct education to my child. I believe every child should be given a fair opportunity, but the system is not made up to be like that. Why should I pay double on tax for my child that is not in the state system? I think it's just so unfair. And yet you can think about private schools being like the elite, like Eton, but a lot of these schools, now our school that our son goes to is really good. It's outstanding. They work extra hard. The fees are not extortionate, but this VAT is going to really bump them up till about £700 per invoices with 3 invoices, 3 terms, 3 invoices over the year. That's a considerable amount. There's going to be a lot of parents that won't be able to take on a second job and cover that. So where do you expect these children to go in a system that's already broken, that hasn't been looked at? Keir Starmer just wants to throw money at the situation and not actually look at the problem.
You are absolutely right. Lots of children will go into the state system, and Kevin will cover this anyway, but it is a fraction of the population that get to go to private schools. So we are talking about the top tier, Kevin.
We are. Generally higher income households. You might be lower income. Sometimes there are people for cultural reasons or other reasons will focus on private education. Your school may not put up fees by the entire 20% because school fees, private school fees since 2010 have risen 20% in real terms. That's more than inflation because private schools have seen demand increase, so they've been charging more because they could. Just dip recently because of the cost of living crisis, but they've been upping their fees and filling their coffers. So hopefully, in your case, the school won't put up fees by the 20% VAT.
They probably will. It sounds like a middle-ranking school. Josephine, can I ask you this? Do you feel that your right to educate your child to the level you can afford in this country is being taken away from you? And therefore, the sacrifices you make... the sacrifices you make, no new car...
I wanted him in a state school. But they put him in an underperforming school. I can't do that.
I can understand your stress, Josephine, and I suppose you're the very person that we're talking about in this conversation that's going to be the most impacted and most affected. Obviously, those mega wealthy probably won't even notice. Josephine, thank you very much for your call. Tina from Buckinghamshire, how do you feel about this? It does sound a little unfair when you listen to our previous caller.
Yes, I listened to it, and I realise this is not what's the word? It's not an easy thing to take on board, but I personally feel very strongly that a lot of the legislation and a lot of the demoralisation within the education system, but the ordinary education system, would not be there if these ministers had to send their children to state schools, because if they had something invested in it, they would make sure that they were up to standard.
Well, it is an interesting idea. So you would want a law brought in that anybody elected as an MP would have to send their children to the local comprehensive or local state school?
I don't want any private schools, whether they be Eton or Winchester or anywhere. I don't want anybody being educated apart from their friends. Most people go to a primary school which has all people in it. Now, I'm the daughter of professionals, but if I hadn't been to a primary school, because I went to a grammar school later on, I would never have met people who had holes in their shoes. I would never have understood why some people stole from shops. I would never have understood the things that our legislature don't understand, because they haven't even been educated with middle class people. They've only been educated by and alongside people of great privilege, and that's why our Prime Minister doesn't know how to fill up his own car and doesn't know how to use a credit card, and it's a disgrace.
Tina, thank you very much. A lot of criticism of Rishi Sunak today on his trainers and his inability to fill up his car. It wasn't actually his car. I think he borrowed it for that.
Tesco worker.
I'm going to have to wrap up this part. Sorry, Mike. I know we could talk about this all day. Thanks for all your calls. We're going to have to move on.